Hey. Oh, lovely. All right. Welcome to the Danger Zone. Oh my gosh. It's been one of those weeks where I was sick last week and I forgot to bring my music and all sorts of weird stuff keeps happening. Everything that seems to be going wrong is going wrong. So that's why you don't have call-in music. But let's see if I can, get old Jeff on the air here. And let's see here. Come on. Anyways, so I hope everybody had a great week without me. And let's see here. Let's see. Where is everybody? Okay. Let's see here. Let's see. What the heck? Okay. All right. And let's see here. All right. Let's see if we can get...
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the call-in studio web interface.
Jeff, are you there?
Audio recording is on. Dual channel.
Jeff, are you there?
I'm here.
All right.
And you are there.
I know, yeah. It's just been one of those like blow up on the launch pad sessions on the show. So it's been 2 weeks and it was like all like it was a bit frustrating, but I'm back at least for another go round until other things happen. I guess we just start off with the happy news in the news today. So start with the economy. Let's see here. This week we had the U.S. payrolls for January, 130,000 jobs in January, which was more than double the estimate of the experts. The unemployment rate fell from 4.5% to 4.3%. Now, a couple caveats with regards to that. Is that we don't necessarily, we always will get a negative revision, right? For the past couple of years, we've always had negative revisions, but, relatively speaking, it's still beating expectations. So take that for what it's worth. Also, given that everyone was like saying, oh, AI is going to replace everybody. We're all going to be gone. We're all going to be whatever. It isn't happening, at least for now. Now, in the broader news, I think for all of 2025, basically they came out with a gigantic negative revision of 1 million jobs, fewer than they thought were created. But still, it was still a net positive number. So, but, one of the things that you have to factor in is that this is also despite the fact that we had 320,000 fewer federal employees. So, so basically you replaced all those jobs last year that were government jobs that people really weren't doing anything useful, and then you replaced it with the same number of private jobs and then some. So that's probably still a good thing. And also in the economic news, do you remember in April of last year, so about 10 months ago, we had Liberation Day, and everyone was complaining, we're going to have a huge surge in inflation because of tariffs. Okay, well, we're 10 months in, and the CPI number came out for January, 2.4% instead of 2.7%, which was the previous month. I think it was also was beat expectations, because I think the expectation was that we were going to get the inflation rate or CPI rate would increase from 2.7 as opposed to fall to 2.4%. Now, if you slice and dice it or whatever, the big drop was in fuel prices, gasoline and stuff like that. There were slight bumps in food, right? I think rent went up a little bit. Electricity went up a decent amount. And I think it was because, it's just, we have AI, but also because of all the renewables that we've had, in terms of all the past years of states adopting green energy. And I think that's one of the other reasons. And of course, you can say it's the AI thing, but, AI still has yet to be widely adopted. And I think they're still building out the data center. So that's still a coming thing. Let's see here. Also, this week, Trump reached a trade deal with the nation of Taiwan, which would probably annoy all my Chinese national friends to call Taiwan a country. Well, spoiler alert. Taiwan is a country. It has its own government. It has its own military. It has its own functioning economy. It has elections. It is a country. It is not a renegade province. Or let's play like this for my progressive friends. Taiwan is more of a country than Palestine is right now. So one of the big, great deals of the Taiwan trade agreement is that Taiwan has agreed to lower to zero tariffs on beef, dairy, and corn. Pork belly tariffs was 40% previously, went down to 10%. Taiwan had a tariff on ham coming from the United States. That was 32%, is now 10%. Taiwan also removed non-tariff barriers for motor vehicles. That would be automobiles for you, for all you people in Capitola, medical devices and pharmaceuticals. In return, the United States dropped the 20% tariff on all Taiwanese imports to about 15%, which is basically the base rate for everybody in terms of tariff. So, they're basically being treated like the more favored nations, except for maybe I think the United Kingdom, which might have 10%. But anyways, it is the same as South Korea and Taiwan. Now, I would almost bet money that for certain exports from Taiwan to the United States, the tariff is still zero. And I bet you that's for the semiconductors and the computer chips. So that's a lot of the good news. And there's more, but since I've been filibustering for a little while, Jeff, do you have any comments?
No, you're hitting the highlights of the main things people care about, the affordability, which both parties are trying to stress that they're so much good at. So just keep going, man. You're on your stack of stuff, and
yep.
I'm trying to follow you if I can.
Yep.
The connection we have by phone isn't great on my end.
But you're coming in great on my end, so that's good. We'll keep on going. Now,
great.
One of the odd little things is that, yes, food prices are, Democrats will complain, the price of food is still going up. Yes, it's up 0.2% from the previous year. Ooh, right? So what the difference is that, when Trump says we're going to get inflation down, right? He doesn't say we're going to get, it's not the implication that we're going to have negative and we're going to have deflation, even though it would be nice if we had some deflation. That much is true. But I think what people often confuse because they didn't go to, college or whatever, is they confuse deceleration with decrease, right? So when things decelerate, that means it still goes up, but it goes up at a slower rate than before, as opposed to your velocity is going down. So, and for inflation, for food and rent and all that stuff, the rate of inflation is slowing down, but that means prices are still going up. They're not going up as fast as they were under the Biden administration, right? And this is the other rub, is that wages are actually going up too. And what you would like to have, or is that you want wages to go up faster than the inflation rate, because then you're ahead of the inflation rate, then you're actually economically better off, right? And under the Biden administration, that wasn't the case. We had lots of inflation and wages were rising, but under Biden, the inflation was ahead of where it was ahead of wages, so that your net purchasing power actually went down about like 5 or 10% over the Biden years. Right now, I think, from the end of the Biden administration until now, the average earnings is actually about 2 to 3% ahead of where they were when Trump took office. So that's probably a good thing. Whether or not people notice it or not is another. Because again, I think people just kind of accentuate the media likes to accentuate the negative and ignore the positive. So when inflation was over 9% under Joe Biden, they were trying to do everything to downplay it, or saying that it was just temporary or corporate greed, or they're trying to hide the fact that, wages are going up. It's like, well, no, wages are going up slower than inflation, right? or that they were like, oh, it's beyond our control. No one could have stopped it. It was inevitable because of the pandemic, lockdowns being lifted. No. But now, now that inflation is actually better than it was under Biden, now all of a sudden, all the people who under Biden were trying to downplay inflation. Now inflation's the worst thing ever. But anyways, on to the other stack of stuff here. Let's see, what other good news can we focus on? Oh yeah, I think this is from the Indian Express, but I think this is reported in a whole bunch of other places. Trump did repeal the landmark climate finding that greenhouse gases posed a threat to human health. And basically in 2009, the Obama administration made a regulatory finding from the EPA saying greenhouse gases constitute a threat to human health, and therefore a whole slew of regulations to regulate greenhouse gases. That'd be mostly carbon dioxide, but to a lesser extent, methane, and I think nitrous oxide, amongst other things, were regulated. And since 2009, we've had a whole slew of regulations regulating greenhouse gases, and it accelerated under the Biden administration. That made things a lot more expensive in terms of anything related to fossil fuels. We also had subsidies, massive government subsidies and mandates for renewable energy, that'd be wind and solar, at the expense of fossil fuels. Now, did it really alter the global temperature? No. Did it reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we emitted? Maybe. I think overall greenhouse gases did decline during the period, but I think more of that was more likely due to the advent of fracking or hydraulic fracturing of drilling of oil and natural gas, which made natural gas much cheaper, which resulted in utilities using natural gas to generate electricity and replacing coal. So they substituted out coal for natural gas. Burning natural gas emits fewer greenhouse gases than burning coal. And that was the primary reason. Now, globally, did we reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that were emitted by all the nations of the world? And the answer is no. No. China and India continue to pump out more greenhouse gases forever and ever and ever. People like the same tree huggers that are upset about Trump revoking this greenhouse gas endangerment ruling, we're praising China for being on the cutting edge of renewable energy. Yeah, so China built some solar plant farms and wind farms, but they also built a whole ton of coal burning plants, gas burning plants, nuclear. They're the all the above thing. Then, as a result, China's the biggest greenhouse gas emitting nation on the planet. I think it's probably more than twice the United States. If you look it up, you can always Google greenhouse gas emitting nations ranking, and then you'll probably get like China, and then I think at some point maybe India's number 2, and then the United States is number 3. But it's like U.S. is way behind, and then so there is that. Now, it's always fun to connect dots that are unrelated. So let's connect a different dot here. Cuba. Jeff, are you familiar with what's going on in Cuba?
Well, I haven't been there lately,
right.
But I know there's much in the news because of what went on in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
Now the supply of gasoline is cut down. So who moves in? China, of course.
Well, Cuba is, if you actually pay attention to international news reports, Cuba is not doing so hot right now. They are on the verge of, people are afraid they're on the verge of complete collapse. And Cuba, being a nice, good, progressive country ruled by communists, were praised by the media for the last 10 years for embracing net zero. The net zero policies, or embracing renewable energy of wind and solar, right? So what have they got now that the supply of oil has been cut off to Cuba? You think the wind and solar energy that is generating enough electricity to keep the lights on in Cuba? What do you think, Jeff?
No, I do not.
Right.
Nope.
Cuba is an example of what would actually happen if the tree huggers in the United States and in the Western world actually had their way. If we completely got rid of fossil fuels, right, and we went to complete renewables, right, we would be Cuba, and it would be bad. Because I think, basically, I think a good chunk of the country is completely without electricity. I think, maybe in Havana, I think they said they have rolling blackouts, and they maybe have electricity for maybe 4 to 12 hours a day, maybe at the maximum. But they're running out. They can't even guarantee that they can fuel airlines that airline flights that land in Havana. They can't guarantee that they can refuel them to go back to wherever they came from. So that's
don't plan on stopping there, folks. You got to move on to a better place.
Right. So,
but it seems to me, sorry for the Cuban people subjected to Fidel Castro and then his brother, and now they're getting the fuel cut off too. It just doesn't seem fair. But someone's got to get in there and change the regime.
Well, the problem is that sometimes you got to have regime change from inside, and if you've had like 50, 60 years of indoctrination that the revolution is the greatest thing ever, it's hard to overcome that. Now, at some point though, right? If you're a dysfunctional society, which Cuba is, things will eventually fall apart. And I think we're seeing that. Now, maybe you can say, hey, it's America's fault. Well, to some extent, Trump basically imposing tariffs on anybody that gives Cuba free oil. You can say that, but the thing is, the rest of the world can just say, nah, we'll suffer the tariffs. We'll give you oil. Or heck, if you're Iran or China. No, Iran or Russia, which already have like gigantic trade sanctions against them, right? They can give Cuba oil, and they don't have to give them that much. I think it's like basically like maybe 1 million barrels a day, whatever, right? And then the Cubans can keep the lights on at least. Granted, they won't have. I mean, previously Mexico and Venezuela gave Cuba a lot of oil. Number one, to keep the lights on, but number two, so that Cuba can resell the oil to get some money to keep the economy going, right? Now that Maduro has been pinched, now that he's sitting in a New York jail or whatever, and Mexico is looking at the prospect of a 25% tariff for if they give oil to Cuba, not so much. So, but the thing is, right, the tree huggers have been pushing the whole world to wean its dependence on fossil fuel. Cuba has had a 15-year head start because they didn't have to deal with political opposition, right? It's the communist government. They can do whatever the F they want. No one's gonna say anything because otherwise you get thrown in jail, right? So they've had 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years to get cheap Chinese solar panels and wind turbines. And where are they now? Where are those solar panels now? I'm sure they got solar panels in Cuba, right? But is it keeping the lights on in Cuba? And the answer is no. Where are the wind turbines? Are they keeping the lights on in Cuba? No. And it's really bad because one of the things that Cuba, in addition to keeping the lights on, more importantly is, even if you're an agrarian society, even if you're just without electricity or whatever, you can grow crops in the rural areas, right? But the people who eat the food are in the city. So how do you get food from the rural area to the city in Cuba? Rhetorical question, Jeff. How do we normally transport food from the rural areas where it's produced into the urban areas where it's consumed?
Well, probably something revolved around gasoline usage, but there's a free enterprise opportunity there for someone to see the need and fill it if they only would be not be restrained by their own government from doing things that make sense.
Right. But the thing is, yes, you need either gasoline or diesel, right, to transport large quantities of food. Now, maybe the Cubans will adopt. Maybe all the people in the city will move out into the rural countryside closer to where the food is produced or whatever, or maybe the people in the rural areas will raise donkeys. Hitch your truck up to a donkey and have the donkey just drag your truck filled with food into the city. You never know.
Oh, there's an opportunity.
There you go. Well, there's a joke. What did communists use to light their homes before candles? Do you know the answer to this one, Jeff?
I just sat at home in the dark. I don't know.
Electricity.
Oh yeah, good electricity. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks very much.
So yeah, so there you go. I mean, I would love to see regime change in Cuba. I don't know if it's going to happen, but at the very least, they won't be making mischief like they have in the rest of Latin America. Now, kind of related to this, this is from the Daily Mail. February 11th, Macron says Spain's mega blackout was due to country's reliance on renewable energy. Do you remember a couple years ago, Spain had a massive blackout, Jeff?
No, I wasn't there.
They had a nationwide blackout. The initial response from the government was, we don't know what caused the blackout, but we definitely know it wasn't because of renewable energy. Well, Macron basically just dropped the dime on him. No, it is because of renewable energy. The problem with renewable energy of wind and solar is that, those two sources of energy generate electricity when the sun shines and the wind blows. Which is completely unrelated to how much you're using, right? So if the wind blows too much or the sun shines too much, guess what happens? You generate too much electricity that more than people are using. If you don't have a backup power system that can store it all, like batteries, and they didn't, guess what happens? You short out the grid, and that's what happened. So, the beauty of fossil fuel is that, you can turn up and crank up the generator. You can crank it up when you really need it. You can throttle it down when you don't. I mean, it's just like, it's what they call it, base load power. Same thing with nuclear power. You can throttle back the reactor rods when you don't need it. You can put them back, stick them all the way back in when you need a lot. So that's the beauty of base load power. And of course, with hydro, you can just, turn off the generator. You unhook the generators. It's great. But, so be that as the case, case may be. It's like, yeah, that's another reason why, being totally reliant on renewables is a bad idea. This is from the New York Post, kind of related. U.S. European car brands lost $114 billion on electric vehicles as idiocy abounds in the U.S. market, by Robert Bryce, New York Post, February 1st. Basically, all the automotive manufacturers are now writing off all the money that they spent on electric vehicles. Why? Because people didn't buy enough of them. I think like Ford wrote off 19 billion, Stellantis wrote off like 24 billion, GM about 8 billion. So it all just adds up. They just all lost a buttload of money. But, so it's a good time. It's a good thing that Donald Trump revoked the climate change endangerment fine, because now automakers can make cars without having to worry about CO2 emissions. Utilities can build natural gas and coal-fired plants without having to worry about emissions or whatever. And to be honest with you, it'll probably be better for the environment because we'll have, cheaper electricity, which is one of the components of inflation right now. Hey, I think we are at the bottom of the hour, Jeff. So let us pay some bills, play some commercials, and we will join you at the other end of the break. This is Jim 2 at the Danger Zone here at the Santa Cruz Voice. Come on. Come on. Play. Is the commercials playing? No, the commercials aren't playing here. God, what is going on here? Everything is.
Board isn't working.
It's one of those like Mercury is in retrograde or something like that. Oh my gosh, it's terribly frustrating. Let's see what else. Guess we'll go on with the other stack of stuff here. Let's see here. Oh, do you remember the 2020 election, Jeff?
Yes. Various aspects of it.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Well,
many people sorry.
The mainstream media made a huge declarations that this was the most secure election ever, and now maybe that was a premature conclusion, because not so much. Yeah. Well, it still might still be the truth, but we're getting some interesting insights. This is from justthenews.com, dated February 10. The FBI has substantiated irregularities in the Georgia 2020 vote counts, probing if they were intentional. This is by John Solomon. Now, a couple weeks ago, the FBI did a raid, executed a search warrant for all you lawyers out there, to the Fulton County, Georgia, that's where Atlanta is, election offices, where they grabbed 700 ballot boxes from the 2020 vote election, right? So, the Fulton County is really, really upset, but they got a warrant, and the Fulton County election authorities filed a motion to say, well, we need the votes back. They don't have proper basis. The warrant, the affidavit for the search warrant is completely bogus. And oh, by the way, can you release the warrant so we can see what's in it? Which is like, well, how do you know what's in the? Well, how do you know the warrant is completely bogus if you don't know what's in it? But so anyways, but eventually the FBI did release the affidavit to the warrant. And let's see here what else is. So the affidavit included, it acknowledges that there were some conspiracy theories, but there were other assertions that they were able to be substantiated. So let's see here. Let's see, what were the highlights of the affidavit? Fulton County has admitted that it does not have scanned images of all of the 528,777 ballots counted during the original count, or the 527,925 ballots counted during the first state recount, a major loss of evidence. So they lost some. They don't have a copy of the ballots. Fulton County has confirmed that during the recount of the votes, some ballots were scanned multiple times. Ballot images were made available in response to public record requests show ballots with unique markings duplicated within the ballot images. So they don't have all the scanned ballots, and some of the scanned ballots that they do have are multiple copies of the same one. Great. During the risk limiting audit, auditors counting the votes by hand reported vote tallies for batches inconsistent with actual votes within the batch. So when they counted, and they go, well, what did we record? What did the guys record previously? The two numbers didn't match. Auditors assisting the risk limiting audit reported counting purported absentee ballots that have never been creased or folded as would have been required for the ballot to be mailed to the voter, or for the ballot to be returned in the sealed envelope requiring the voter's signature authentication. So there were absentee ballots that were not folded or creased. They were pristine. And of course, for an absentee ballot, they mail it to the voter, and the voter fills it out and then mails it back, which means the voter, it's probably should have been folded at least twice. But anyways, hey, on the day of
that's why we have people at the county can fold them for you.
Yeah, they can fold them for you. There you go.
By your helpful county government.
And they didn't even bother to they should have folded it the first time when they mailed it out to the people, but they didn't, which implies that these things were kind of printed, just added into the thing. On one of the other, the last one I think is on the day of the deadline to report recount results, Fulton County reported a recount totaling of 511,343 ballots, 17,000 ballots fewer than the original count. The following day, Fulton County then reported 527,000 ballots counted, the affidavit noted. So, yeah, they basically, they couldn't they couldn't count straight. I mean, it's just, now granted, if the margin of victory for Joe Biden in 2020 was like 1 million votes, or several 100,000 votes, you'd be like, big deal. But no, the margin of error was literally like less than just under 12,000 votes. So little counting snafus like this could have made a difference. And of course, let's see here what else is there. Some Zero Hedge, February 11th. Panic ensues after Trump orders the CIA to give 2020 election intel to the Stop the Steal lawyer. President Donald Trump has instructed the CIA and other spy agencies to hand over intelligence related to the 2020 election. A bunch of presumably panicked U.S. intelligence officials tell Politico and NBC News. The records are to be handed over to Kurt Olson, now a temporary government employee of the White House, who 4 years ago was involved in the Stop the Steal campaign to determine whether Joe Biden won the 2020 election via cheating. And you know they're freaking out by what they're telling us. So why would the CIA actually have election intel from the 2020 election? Well, it's like this. Assuming they do, right? They just gather stuff, right? But why would the media be freaking out? Why would they be freaking out, right? If the CIA intel was right, if the CIA intel was there's nothing, there was interference, but they didn't do anything. They wouldn't be. I wouldn't be freaking out. I'd be just like, okay, yeah, go ahead, take a look at it. Told you. But no, they're freaking out. So there's something, tells you there's something to hide there. Now, apparently, Kristi Noem was in the state of Arizona today and gave a press conference basically saying that Arizona's election security, in 2020 also sucked. So could it be that the next FBI raid might be in Maricopa County, Arizona? That'd be Phoenix for all you Hawaiian moms in Capitola. And of course, this also brings us to the SAVE Act. You remember that you're familiar with all the recent kerfluffle over the SAVE Act regarding elections, Jeff?
Yes. People don't want it to be saved.
Well, the SAVE Act, for all you people who may not actually pay attention to it, but we'll hit the highlights, right? Number one, it requires photo ID to vote in any election. Number two, it requires you to provide. Yeah. Number two, it requires you to provide proof of citizenship when you register to vote. Right? I mean, people were saying that this is somehow racist or sexist or whatever because apparently black people don't know how to do this. Now, there are about 30 some odd states where you have to have voter ID, right, to vote. Some of them southern states, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, where lots of black people live, right?
And they're doing pretty well.
They're voting. And it's not like they're, like the voter participation of black voters in these states are less than those in states that don't require voter ID, right? And here's the other thing, right? The requirement to vote under the SAVE Act is the same requirement to get a real ID, photo ID. So it's pretty much the same. And the one that I thought was hilarious was it discriminates against women because apparently women are incapable of getting, providing photo ID or obtaining photo ID. But the underlying argument is that, well, when women get married and they change their name, right, their birth certificate is one of the ways you prove you're a U.S. citizen. It's like the name on your birth certificate won't match the name you're given, right? And to which I say, it's like, no, it's easy. All you got to do is provide a marriage certificate or a decree of divorce. Every time, when married women change their names or whatever, boom, you got it. And then, of course, the other question is...
The alternative to that is that a death certificate, proof of who you are.
Yeah, but then again, hopefully dead people aren't voting, right? Maybe they get a mail-in ballot, right? But I don't know what the postmark is for the afterlife. Is it heaven or hell or nirvana or whatever, limbo or whatever? But case. So here's the other thing is that a lot of the people, just in terms of the overlap, right? A lot of the people that oppose voter ID, there's almost close to 100% overlap between those people and the people that wanted you to provide a vaccine passport during the pandemic, right? So during the pandemic, right, you had to show, verification, like some document that showed that you got vaccinated against the COVID, the Wuhan, China virus, the Fauci bioweapon of death virus or whatever. And what else did you have to provide to it, right? Because if you just had this little piece of paper saying, Jim 2 got vaccinated for the coof, what else did you have to provide? For me, right? You have to provide a photo ID saying, I'm Jim 2. Or, but granted, for the record, I didn't get the poke. But so the people that were so eager beaver to push vaccine passports, proof of vaccination to go into any public accommodation, be it a grocery store, a restaurant, government building, hospital, or whatever. They didn't have any problem with, women can't get photo ID, black people can't get photo ID. You get your ass a photo ID and you show me your proof of vaccination, right? So that in and of itself should just go to show that this is just a pretext for something else. Now,
something else could be the same people that are objecting to the SAVE Act are also objecting to ICE being out there in the communities rounding up the illegals.
Yep, and that's true too. That's true too. Now, that's the other weird thing is that, during the last couple of years of the Obama administration, ICE agents were actually apprehending illegal aliens and deporting them. Did you notice, Jeff, in 2015 and 2016, a bunch of protesters following ICE agents around, harassing ICE agents, using their cars to block traffic so ICE agents couldn't get where they were? Did you notice in 2015 or 2016 people actively trying to dox ICE agents, disclosing their identities in public and encouraging people to go after them? Did you notice any of that?
Oh, how far we have fallen.
Right.
No, there was none of that.
Right. Now, the thing is, liberals will post social media accounts. Well, under Barack Obama, millions of people were deported, and under Trump, only like 600,000 people were deported. What's going on here? Right. Well, part of that millions of people deported under Barack Obama was back then they counted catch and release as a deportation. So if ICE or Immigration and Customs Enforcement or the Border Patrol caught you trying to cross the southern border, they shined a light in your eyes and said, "Go, vamos," right? You just they caught you trying to cross. You just go back to Mexico. They counted that as a deportation, right? But even if excluding the catch and release, you about 250 to 300,000 interior deportations a year conducted by ICE. Bonus points, ICE even actually accidentally deported actual citizens. I think 4 or 5 citizens were actually removed by mistake, which is under Trump, 0. Now you hear media stories saying, "Oh, Trump deported citizens." No, Trump didn't deport any citizens. What they're trying to conflate is like Trump will deport an illegal alien who has minor children, who had children while they were here illegally, and the children are minors. And so when the parents had to go, they just took their kids with them, right? So the kids weren't deported, but so they try little stunts like that. But so again, I think one of the reasons that that progressives have flipped the switch on deportations and stuff like this is because if you look at domestic migration, of people who are citizens and lawful permanent residents, legal aliens, right, as opposed to illegal aliens, more people are leaving the blue states than going to blue states, and more people are going to red states than leaving the red states. What that means is that more red states are gaining in population relative to blue states. And what that means is every 10 years when you have a census and you have to allocate electoral votes and congressional districts, right, congressional seats in the House of Representatives, red states are gaining seats. And one of the reasons that Democrats, I think, are really, really into sanctuary cities and keeping a whole bunch of illegals in the United States, because illegal aliens tend to go more to blue cities and blue states, and therefore it keeps their population numbers from shrinking relative to the growth of the red states, right? So so they don't lose as many congressional seats. I think if you didn't count illegal aliens in the census for purposes of reapportionment and electoral votes, blue states would probably lose anywhere from about 10 to 12 electoral votes and congressional seats to the red states. So, and if that happens, no Democrat would win the presidency unless they could flip a couple of red states, which is possible, but it's hard, right? Let's say like if we had the 2020 election all over again, right? And you factored in the switch in electoral votes, right? Joe Biden would not have won. Just simply because of the switch in electoral votes, actually, he might have. Yeah, he might have won, but his margin would be a lot shorter. But Kamala Harris would not have beaten Trump in 2024, even if she had flipped the three blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So there is that in the Stack O stuff. Let's see what else is on. What else is on my?
Biden also benefited. There was like an extra 14 million votes somewhere that came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't looked into that yet either.
Yeah,
we'll get back to it.
I don't know if we'll ever get back to it. But speaking of things which I don't know if we'll ever get back to, the old Epstein thing, which I guess I was just raring to talk about last week, but I couldn't because I was sick. I mean, the previous week, 2 weeks ago on Friday, I think they released the 3 million pages of emails and pages of documents and emails and stuff like that, right? And one of the so this is like, so when people started to look through all this stuff was after I started doing the show 2 weeks ago. And the curious thing about it was that there was an email between Jeffrey Epstein and Michael Wolff. Michael Wolff is a journalist who's very hostile to Trump, right? In February of 2016. So this is right around the time Trump is like kind of winning the primaries, but I don't think he necessarily secured the GOP nomination, but it was almost getting to the point where he was going to get it. Because I remember voting in the California primary at the end of in March, right? And I voted for Ted Cruz because I didn't vote for Trump, right? But I think it was right around the Indiana primary where Trump won the Indiana primary, and then most people said it was over. So in February of 2016, Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein were trading emails. And Michael Wolff was asking, hey, Jeffrey, do you have any dirt on Trump so that we can either stop his, kill his campaign, right? Keep him from becoming president, or if he becomes president, we have blackmail material on him, right? And Jeffrey Epstein's response was famously, Trump knew about the girls, but he never got a massage, which is the massage is got a massage is coded phrase for had sex with underage teenage girls. Right. And to me, that should have been, at least for me, that was like, boom, Jeffrey Epstein said Trump didn't partake. That should end the discussion, right? Because the thing is, like, if it was in the context of, like Donald Trump had a gun to Jeffrey Epstein's head and said, did I take part in this? And, and Epstein said no, then I would say, okay, he said under duress. But no, he said it in a circumstance where he hated Trump. Michael Wolff hated Trump. And Wolff was asking, do you have any dirt on Donald Trump? And he admitted Trump never got a massage. Yet, I still have progressive friends who still believe and they still call Donald Trump a pedophile, right? Yet, Jeffrey Epstein himself said Donald Trump did not get a massage. He did not partake in having sex with underage teenage girls. So, but yet...
Well, that doesn't prove it necessarily. He may have had some motive for saying that. But the real truth is, if you look through all the documents that were available to Biden and everyone else, you haven't found it yet. It ain't there.
No, it is. To me, this is as close as definitive as possible. Because who was the person that was running this underage teen sex ring? Jeffrey Epstein, right? So if Jeffrey Epstein should know, who he was setting up. He's setting up with teenage girls for blackmail material, right? So, and you think, maybe it was like some dude that was like some obscure dude that later on you forgot. Okay, that I understand. But Donald Trump is not an obscure dude that you later forgot, right? So you'd think that he would remember Donald Trump. He was a famous dude even before he ran for president. We all, for good or for ill, right?
They were both in New York.
Yeah. So the fact that Donald Trump, that Jeffrey Epstein said Trump never participated in this, you had Jeffrey Epstein's criminal defense lawyer saying, Epstein told me Trump never partook. You had the lawyer that prosecuted prosecuted Jeffrey Epstein in 2008, 2009 or whatever, gave him the sweetheart deal. I think it's Alex Pena. I think that's his name. said Trump wasn't involved, right? Okay, but Pena was Donald Trump's Secretary of Labor. Okay, fine, whatever, right? Ghislaine Maxwell said Trump wasn't involved. Now, granted, she's probably aiming for a pardon, but you had the attorney for the known Epstein victims say Donald Trump wasn't involved, right? Let's see, who else did you say? Who else said Trump wasn't involved? Oh, you had Virginia Roberts Giuffre say, I never saw Trump do anything wrong or do anything weird or improper, right? He was always a perfect gentleman, right? Let's see, who else is there? Oh, yeah, you had Glenn Prager, the Department of Justice senior investigator on the Epstein case, say Trump was not involved. Yet people still want to believe it, right? Despite all that evidence, right? And of course, there's also the previous, previous evidence that we do of just by inference, right? If there was anything that would implicate Donald Trump in the Epstein files, Joe Biden had the Epstein files for 4 years. And, they didn't release a single thing. And, they didn't even leak a single thing that implicates Donald Trump. Yep. People still want to believe, right? They'll just say, well, you're just spinning. Am I the one that's spinning, or are you the one that's spinning? Because I could point out, Jeffrey Epstein himself said it, right? Well, Epstein could be lying. Well, why would he be lying in the circumstance of an email with Michael Wolff, right? Given the fact that both of them did not like Trump, right? You know what I mean? And the senior Department of Justice investigator, Glenn Prager, right? The circumstance of that conversation was interesting because basically Glenn Prager was at an airport in I think it's Phoenix, Arizona. And someone approached him and said, "Hey, you Glenn Prager?" "Yeah, I'm Glenn Prager." "Were you the senior investigator on the Epstein case?" "Yeah." "Was Trump involved?" "No." Right? And Prager didn't know that the person who was talking to him was secretly recording him. Right. So he didn't know he was being recorded. So, he probably had reason to be honest. Right. I mean, the person that was talking to him wasn't wearing a MAGA hat and pointing a gun to his head. It was just, some person trying to be surreptitious or whatever. Right. Of course. Oh, by the way, the source of the Glenn Prager interview undercover recording is from O'Keefe Media Group. And you can listen to the video yourself. You can listen to the video in its full in context. You could just, you can't. You won't be able to claim selective editing or AI or whatever. But again, you could have Jesus Christ himself or the Lord Almighty come on down from the second coming and say, "I am Jesus Christ, the Son of God, Savior of man. I can tell you that Donald Trump was not involved in the Epstein files." And you still have these people believing that Donald Trump was involved was a pedophile, right? Or was involved in the Jeffrey Epstein thing. So yeah, there you go. Right. So
don't forget to bring in that the salacious thing about the doctor who said Jeffrey Epstein's postmortem said that he was strangled, not hanged.
Yep. But you have, that's a beautiful thing about the Epstein thing is it just fuels all the conspiracy theories. So you have a famous coroner saying that Epstein, based on his examination, Epstein was strangled, not didn't hang himself, right? You have another story, I think it's from the Independent, basically saying that the jail the prison that had him basically had a fake body, to try to deceive the media that they were moving his body so they can move the real body, without them looking, right? There's another one. Apparently, there is the Benny Johnson show had talked about this story. Apparently, the night after or soon after they discovered Epstein committed suicide in the prison, someone posted on 4chan that, "Hey, I'm a guard at that prison, and the night before I actually saw Epstein being wheeled out in a wheelchair in an ambulance." Right? Right. And so it's a 4chan thing, right? It's wacko doodles, normal, anybody can say anything on 4chan. It's almost as bad as the FBI anonymous tip line for all the people saying, "Oh, I saw Donald Trump involved in raping 5-year-old girls," or something like that, right? But the thing that made this really, really weird was apparently the DOJ or the FBI went to 4chan and shook the information out of them to figure out where the IP address, where it was posted from at the time, and they were able to track down the IP address to a guy named Robert Gravalja, who, ding, 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 guess what? Actually worked at the federal prison in Manhattan and was on duty at the time he said he would. So, did it happen? Is Epstein still alive? Oh, there also, Benny Johnson's show is also pointing out, there are people reporting on the internet that apparently Jeffrey Epstein had an Xbox account, for playing video games on your console online, and apparently someone's still using it. Or apparently he had a World of Warcraft account too, and apparently someone's still using it.
It didn't go to purgatory or to heaven for some use up there.
The conspiracy theory is that they swap, they smuggled Epstein out, they put someone else's dead body in the cell, and that Jeffrey Epstein is somewhere else in the world, maybe Israel or whatever. And he's sitting there on his freaking. He's sitting on an Xbox, playing. I don't know what they play on Xbox, Counter-Strike or something like that. I don't know. Hero of Honor, Medal of Honor, or something like that. Or he's playing his little druid shaman gnome thing on Worlds of Warcraft. I don't know, but it does entertain conspiracy theories. I don't know if any of those things are true, right? But what I do know is that if Jeffrey Epstein really did say in an email to Michael Wolff that Trump never got a massage, that's pretty definitive that Trump didn't participate in Epstein's little side hustle. But, people want to believe what they want to believe. Like, these are the same people that, still believe that Trump colluded with the Russians, despite the fact that the Mueller report basically said we could find no evidence that Trump colluded with the Russians. And they go, well, the Mueller report didn't say Trump didn't collude. It's like, well, that's technically true if you want to be pedantic, but given that you had a whole year and a half of investigating Trump, and you had the power of the FBI, and you also had a Title Section 7 FISA warrant on all of Trump's communications, right? And you still couldn't find anything. I think that pretty much would support the notion that, Trump didn't collude with the Russians, but people still believe it, right? Well, what about...
Trump had already pretty well convicted Trump of doing that, and they didn't want to undo what they had done, because you never want to admit you're wrong.
No, they can't admit they're wrong. That's the thing. And of course, it's like, well, what about when Don Jr. met those people in Trump Tower? It's like, someone said they had dirt on Hillary Clinton, and then they met him, and then they asked, hey, if you get elected, could you undo the Majenski Act or whatever? And Don Jr. was like, this isn't what we're here for. Bye. It's like, okay, that's not evidence of collusion, right? That's evidence of being kind of taken for a ride, but be that as it may. So again, people believe what they want to believe, and sadly, it's on the other side. And no amount of evidence is ever going to change their belief, despite the fact that most of the evidence really should. Yeah. Anyways, so I guess we got about like 15 seconds left on the show. Normally I would play outro music, but since my thumb drive doesn't appear to be working today.
Good show, Jim. You did a great job of prep and presentation.
Everyone have a great weekend. Santa Cruz Voice, Danger Zone.